just want to make a quick announcement. Mr. Dixon asked me to notify you. I went and looked into the issue that we discussed during that training. So for those of you that were keenly interested in becoming national delegates, that is to say delegates to the LP National Convention in Columbus, Ohio this June, the national delegate sign-up list is at delegate registration. So just look for a list with a bunch of blank spots and some names filled in. It says national delegates at the top of it. Fill your name out there if you want to be on the list. Okay, with that we'll start our debate festivities. So once again, my name is Kurt Hildebrand. I'll be one of your co-moderators for this evening. I'm the chairman of the Hays County Libertarian Party, and I'm also running for state chair of the Libertarian Party of Texas.
All right. Yeah.
And my partner here is Mr. Ed Kless. I'll let him introduce himself.
Yeah.
Good evening. Ready to have some fun?
Yes.
All right, that's what it's all about.
Yeah.
Thanks for being here, and I really appreciate the turnout tonight. This is absolutely fantastic. We're looking forward to moderating this. I am Ed Kless. I'm the current and duly elected chair of Collin County. Where's my Collin County? Woo! And we're looking forward to tonight, so we're just going to jump in and get started. So, Kurt, it's all yours.
Thank you, Ed. All right, so we're going to start. The first thing I'd like to do is just explain for everyone's benefit what our debate format is going to be tonight. So we're going to have 4 debates tonight and one kind of special event. The very first thing on our agenda is not quite going to be a debate, but we are going to have some candidates speak. But our general debate format, just for everyone's understanding, is going to be a 3-minute opening statement. Then we'll go into a question and answer. We need questions from you, the audience, to make this process work. You can see up on the screen there that we have a telephone number where you can text your questions to make it as simple and streamlined as we possibly can. Text your questions to that number. If you want to say that you want to direct those questions to a particular race, for example, senator or AG or railroad commissioner or whatever, you can include that in your message just so we know which race you're referring to, or if it's just an open-ended question. We'll take that, we'll filter it at our discretion, we'll ask those questions. 90 seconds for the answers for our debaters there. Depending on the situation, we may offer a debate or a rebuttal, 30-second rebuttal at our discretion, and then we'll go into 2-minute closing statements. So I just want to say that we're going to work our very best, Ed and I, in conjunction here to ensure that each debater receives approximately equal speaking time. We will ask the debaters not to interrupt each other so during their speaking periods, but again, at our discretion, we'll try to facilitate that back and forth, that conversation. And we would ask for no inappropriate behavior, such as ad hominem attacks or vulgarity or anything like that. That would be tolerated. So with that, I'd like to introduce our first event. And our first event, as I'm going to call it, is for Railroad Commissioner. Mr. Mark Miller and Mr. Jason Kute are running for Railroad Commissioner for the nomination. But they have actually declined to have a formal debate for this race, but they did want to have an opportunity, both of them, to address you tonight. And so what we're going to do is I'll introduce both of those gentlemen. And the way that we're going to do this is that when we introduce the candidate, we'll ask them to come up to the stage throughout all of the debates that we have here. And once those 2 gentlemen get on the stage, then we'll give them each about 3 minutes for some remarks for you. So Mark Miller. Dr. Mark Miller is a native-born and longtime resident of Texas. Working his entire career as a petroleum engineer, he is taught at the University of Texas at Austin, established a worldwide consulting practice, and he's currently the CEO and CTO of a small company that develops oil and gas-related software. Mark first registered as a libertarian in 1972. Wow. So, with that, Mr. Jason Kute became a libertarian back in college, but he fell out of political activism for a little over a decade after he got married. The Bush years renewed his interest in politics, leading up to his support for Ron Paul in the 2012 election cycle. His attendance at the RNC as part of the Texas delegation convinced him that the reform of the Republican Party as a path to liberty was a hopeless cause. And that the Libertarian Party was the only viable path to true reform. This year, he's running for the office of Railroad Commissioner, though he plans to step down in favor of Mark Miller and support his campaign. So welcome, Jason Kute.
Thank you. I'd like to first thank my new best friend, Jason Kute. Actually, Jason and I had the opportunity to have several very lengthy discussions about issues facing the Railroad Commission, and one of the things that we came to realize is that we both pretty much felt the same. We did have the chance to sit at a forum together up in Fort Worth recently, and I have to tell you that I would have glad to have had him be our candidate for Railroad Commission. I always feel compelled when I talk about my campaign for Railroad Commissioner to start out by making sure my audience knows that the Railroad Commission has absolutely nothing to do with railroads. Rather, the Railroad Commission, its primary responsibility is regulating the oil and gas business in Texas. Obviously very important to Texas, representing about 15% of the state's economy. It is arguably the most important regulatory agency in the entire United States whose heads are elected and not appointed. It's a very important position. I'd like to talk about the fact that us libertarians are very conflicted when it comes to regulations. Though we totally understand the need to keep government from interfering in our personal and our economic lives, we also understand that there are other very powerful entities out there that can take away our liberties and that can interfere with the use of our property. And really, us libertarians are in the best position to balance individual liberties while still continuing a system of free and prosperous enterprise. My campaign focuses on three main themes. The first is improving the confidence in the Railroad Commission. It is far too important an agency to be obscure and misunderstood by Texans. That needs to change. There was a Sunset Commission report for the last legislature that recommended some significant changes in refusal policies and campaign donations that I totally support and I would encourage you to read. Secondly, is reform and modernization. I believe every regulatory agency ought to have a sunset provision where periodically every regulation is reviewed for whether it's still valid or not. And please don't even get me started about who they hired to modernize their IT system. And third is protection of surface property rights. The Railroad Commission has done a very good job over the years of taking care of conflicts between people that had economic interests. But we're in an era with shales and other things that those economic interests are not shared by people who have surface rights. The Railroad Commission has been slow to do that. Please, I would be pleased to have your vote for Railroad Commissioner. Thank you.
I have to apologize. There's one point about our format that I neglected to mention, but I will do so real quickly now for the benefit of our audience as well as our debaters. So we will have a timekeeper and a moderator. Mr. Kless and I will sort of share that responsibility back and forth throughout the night. And the timekeeper will hold up a yellow notice to the debaters when they reach 30 seconds of their time, and then red when they reach 10 seconds of their time, and they need to wrap it up. So just so everyone's aware of that format. So thank you again, Mr. Miller, and Mr. Hughes. Your statement, please.
That's all you got, Mark?
For now.
For now, good. One of the reasons I'll be stepping down is so that Mark can answer all the questions about the railroad. I'd like to start off by talking a little bit about what sort of issues come up when it comes to Railroad Commission and things that it governs, and also some things that it doesn't govern. The big debate that we were up in Fort Worth about was regarding the earthquakes. And Mark has done plenty of research on his own regarding that, and just what a hairball that the wastewater injection wells can be. Water is kind of an interesting entity in that it's both shared and renewable resource. If you and I use water at home and we return it to the company that furnishes us with that water, and then that company is required to clean it. And if we go too far with our use of that water and it's too toxic for them to clean up, we get in trouble. But the oil and gas industry, they just sort of take that water out of the equation. Instead of renting it, they sort of confiscate it, and then it's out of the system. And so when we start talking about things like droughts and lakes that are down to 1/3 of their capacity, it becomes a really sticky issue, and you really need somebody that knows their stuff to be on top of that. Let's see. I think Mark hit upon that we do need a libertarian in this particular office, because it is a very powerful office, more power actually than the governorship in the state has. And so it's very high profile, and also it's a good opportunity for us to shine, because as Mark pointed out, regulation is not something that we are famous for supporting, and so how we would act in a regulatory capacity is a very, I think, important showpiece for us. The other thing that Mark has hit upon is the need for party unity. And one of the reasons that we need to have that is that there are a number of issues with this that the regulatory capacity of the railroad industry does not encompass. A number of us have talked about the fact that in order to really make some changes, we're going to have the need to pierce that corporate veil. We need to hold people accountable on a personal level. You can run into problems where, a small mom and pop industry is, handling your waste for you. They're very small. They don't have a lot of money to throw around, and so if they go bankrupt, and the people impacted by that don't really have a lot of any place to turn. I think I'm out of time, but
Yes, you are, Mr. Kute. Thank you for your statements, both gentlemen. And I just want to say in closing, before you kind of release you from the stage there, that I just think that this is just a phenomenal example of exactly what you just talked about. This idea of party unity and coming together, for what's best for the libertarian mission overall. So I congratulate you both.